Good morning, folks, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. It's the 22nd of August, and this is our regularly scheduled meeting of the Clean Heat Standard Technical Advisory Group. I'm Rick Weston, the chair. We have a quorum, and some of our members will be coming in and out over the next 3 hours, but we should be in good shape. Welcome all again. I'll start by reminding folks, please keep your microphones muted unless obviously you want to say something. And members of the public, please keep your video off, except when you have a chance to speak during the public comment periods. As usual, we don't rely on the chat for discourse, but for the posting of links to documents and that sort of thing is fine. So with that, I'll go right immediately to the first bit of order that we need to deal with is the agenda. We need to make slight modifications to it. We're not going to be hearing from Matt today in detail on the proposals that he had told us that they'd like to make to the TAG and to the PUC. They're not quite ready for prime time yet, right? Is that about right, Matt? That's a fair way to put it?
Yeah, that is fair. I'm happy to give you another brief summary, but you've heard it before. I just need to get it vetted by an attorney, and then it'll become a public document. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Time.
No, I fully understand and appreciate it. And just slight rearranging of the discussion about coordination with other energy programs and double counting. As you see now, I put together, with the help of some of you, a 3-page document, which I've called, as I have before the other ones, a statement from the TAG. It's a draft. It's for us to review and consider approving and sending to the PUC on these issues. Again, coordination with other energy programs and 2 dimensions of double counting. So we'll treat those as one long discussion with a break in the middle at the appropriate hour. Is there any objection to those changes in the agenda? Great. Okay.
Have 2 alternates, I think, or maybe just 1.
Oh, yes.
Or two people from Energy Efficiency Vermont.
Right. With Emily Roscoe today are Dave Westman and Ben Plotzker. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. And if I might, with me today are Matthew Baker-Poole and Ben Belaski, who are also on the agenda.
Great. Well, I mean, hello, welcome back from your vacation, TJ. Good to see you. Okay. Then the next bit of business is our review and approval of the minutes of the last meeting, the August 8th meeting. I hope you've all had a chance to go through them. They seem straightforward to me. Does anyone have any comments or changes that you would recommend? And if not, I'll take a motion to approve them.
So moved.
Brian Woods. Okay. We have a motion to approve the minutes of August 8th. All in favor signify by raising your hand, putting up your hand signal or whatever we have, that sort of thing. Yep. That looks like they passed. Great. Any opposed? We're good. They are approved and sent off to the PUC. Thank you very much. Okay. First, the next item on the agenda are updates from the PUC. So I'll turn it to Deirdre Morris. Thank you, Deirdre.
Sure. So a few things, plugging in a reminder for the ethics training that was sent around in the agenda and minutes of last meeting. If you haven't done it yet and aren't a state employee, I got a few emails that you don't need to create an account or worry about creating an account. You can just take the training and enter in your email and get the certificate that way and keep it for your records.
Deirdre, may I interrupt immediately on this point? I
Yeah.
did it, and I did get an email from some AI or person or something asking me, what my role in state government was or an affiliation. So it seemed like, I mean, I just left it blank, but they seem to want to know something. So I do need to respond to that. It seemed a little annoying though.
Oh, good to know. Yeah, I don't know what it looks like on that end if you don't have an account, so,
Right, okay. Just so be warned, folks.
okay. If any of you are engaging with VFDA's motion to reconsider the commission's order on credit ownership, those replies to the responses are due next Tuesday on the 27th. Speaking of requests for comment, so the commission's decided to hold all additional requests for comment until the rule is put out. This affects advisory groups less, affects participants in the case a bit more. So, you all will continue doing your work, submitting recommendations to the commission, but the commission's not going to be submitting any more straw proposals, for instance. And this is really allowing us to focus on getting the rule out in, in early October, which will give, participants a chance to comment on the rule as a whole. So, we obviously deeply appreciate all the feedback we've received so far and look forward to the additional feedback we'll get on the rule. And we will issue a memo, just communicating this decision in the next week or so. Yeah, Matt.
Hi, DJ. So if I understand that correctly, no more straw proposals from the PUC, but what about the existing straw proposals that are out there, which have generated comments?
Yep, so those are under consideration, basically being fed into how we're going to be drafting the rule. So those are being fully considered. The straw proposal, I don't think there's any open deadlines on those, on any of the straw proposals right now. So pivoting to a few opinion dynamics deliverable timeline updates. So one quick correction. So the spreadsheet of question and answers that were sent around in preparation for this meeting, just a clarification, some of the responses reference a May 31st memo. For your purposes, that's really a June 10th memo. I think the May 31st was when we got it, the PUC got it. So quick clarification there. And then looking forward, so Opinion Dynamics plans to share their deliverable related to the emission schedule with the PUC, I think this Friday. So that'll be, characterization of grid electricity, fossil fuels, and wood. So if we're getting that on Friday, then we can probably presumably share that with the TAG next week and in advance of the next TAG meeting on, I think, what is it, 9/5. So that'll be a pretty big deliverable to consider for this group. And then they plan to be able to characterize clean fuels on August 30th to the PUC. So that would be a little bit tight for the next meeting, but that's, at least on the calendar. So that can be expected soon too. And given that will be quite a lot to review, the draft TRM is now expected September 9th. So there's a few things to shift around in this draft schedule, the proposed meeting Excel that had been circulated to kind of accommodate those deliverables, but just wanted to communicate when to expect those things. I think that's all I have, but happy to answer questions if there are any.
I'll start with one and just say, Deirdre, why don't you and I chat next week or maybe even tomorrow briefly about what we need to, looking at that spreadsheet of,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Okay. Any questions from folks? Is that it, Deirdre? You're all set?
Yep, that's it.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, item 3. Overview of emissions factor spreadsheets used in the potential study. TJ, Matthew Bakerpool, I turn it over to you. We've got, let's see, we've got 20 minutes on the schedule for this, but I think we've got some room to maneuver if the discussion gets lively.
Well, really, it's just turning over right to Matthew, who needs no introduction now.
Well, I suppose we could just start by taking comments. I know that carbon intensities are a hot topic, and I don't think the model is going to be able to get to a level of detail that satisfies all parties. You know, it's an effort in coming up with the best value with the information available at the current time. So I'm happy to answer what questions I can. We still have a bunch of comments out to NV5 to get clarification. And the values are likely to change in the final revision. By how much is to be determined. But like I said, I'm happy to answer questions as I can now.
Would it would it make sense to share your screen, Matthew? Put the spreadsheet up there, even though
Sure.
it may be hard to see, at least we'll have some sort of, point of reference.
Let me make sure you can share your screen. There you go. Now you should be able to.
Okay, so this is the file that was sent to TAG members. It's part of the meeting materials for today. The file is called emissions factors. These are the values that are used in not the version of the output results that were provided to the TAG on the 25th, but a subsequent version of model outputs. For those who haven't seen it, the file includes combustion emissions for combustible fuels, generation emissions for electricity, emissions factors, and it also includes upstream emissions factors. And the combustion and generation and upstream emissions factors are combined to produce a total emissions factor, which is the input for determining the life cycle emissions impacts of the model. Not for determining the inventory component of the emissions, as the inventory only accounts for the gross in-state emissions and not the upstream components of the emissions, since it's not on a life cycle basis.
Got it. Okay, Brian, your hand is up. Let me see, I may be. Gosh, where am I? Yeah, Brian,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Yeah, can you roll this back all the way to columns A through G? I was just trying to figure out, so row 8 is wood, and it's got a marginal combustion emissions factor of 0. But the wood energy in the residential sector below has emission factors associated with it, and I was trying to understand what's the difference.
I believe this is treatment of wood as a renewable, and the way that they've provided this table for the renewable fuels, there's no upstream emissions component because the value provided in the combustion section of the table is the life cycle emissions value. So where you're seeing a non-zero value for wood, for example, this 29.1 kilograms of CO2e per MMBTU, that essentially is the upstream and combustion component for life cycle accounting using the GWP global warming potential biogenic factor of 0.3.
So what's happening on row 8? That's wood energy used, if it's not used for any of the thermal applications that are in the rows below, is that wood for electricity? Or what is that?
I believe so. We can get a clarifying question to NV5 on that one as well, but it's
Okay.
possible that this value is just taken from the inventory's tabulation of fuel sources and is not used in the treatment of calculating the emissions values for measures. But that's a question.
Okay, great. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Pass that along. I'm interested to just clarify that.
Yeah, Floyd.
I
Floyd?
keep forgetting I have 2 mute buttons. So Matthew, a couple of questions. I think I heard you say that these are not life cycle carbon intensities. Is that right?
So for the traditional fuels that are in the inventory, like electric, natural gas, propane, fuel, oil, and wood,
Mm-hmm.
this section of the table is the combustion value, not the life cycle or combustion plus upstream value. For the values that are not in the inventory, the particular fuels that are not in the inventory, it is a life cycle emissions value. And I'm not sure why. Maybe that just made entering these values into their model workbook easier. They could have, for example, moved the values that are life cycle just all the way to the right of this table, but I don't know how their model is structured. So you can
Yeah,
see
it's a
see
little
both
confusing.
aspects. Just
Yeah.
it certainly is a little confusing.
Yeah, because that's labeled as combustion factors when in fact it seems like it's being treated as life cycle. Another question is, given that those are full life cycle numbers for the, kind of the non-baseline fuels, one comment I would make is well, the waste and the purpose grown for both biodiesel and renewable diesel need to be further delineated, because there is a difference between the two. The way the programs that have a low carbon fuel standard on the West Coast differentiate those two is with indirect land use change factor. So there's a a definite difference between those two. And they both have like the biogenic uptake that offsets the combustion. But the waste oil obviously doesn't have an indirect land use change assessed to it, whereas the crop-based purpose grown does by the regulators. So I would suggest that that is a non-trivial difference, and therefore they should be differentiated. And then the third comment I would make is the biodiesel number, if I did my calculations correctly, looks about right with in line with California's and Oregon's numbers. The renewable diesel is a bit higher than it should be. If I just looked at the first quarter of 2024, and if I did my math right, it should be, in the 34 to 43 range. Obviously, we would prefer the 34 because that's, these sort of market programs are going to incentivize the lowest carbon intensity fuels to come to your state, which means that you'll get a general trend towards the lower end. But yeah, that number 50.7 is at least 7 points higher than it should be, based on what's happening in California and Oregon. And, if the market under this program is designed properly, then it should elicit a similar response.
Great, thank you.
Sam?
Thanks, Rick. First, thanks, Matthew. I saw that you addressed some of the points that I had raised last time in your email. Appreciate that. Mainly just want to, I guess, bring up that idea again around declining CI score. So, of course, understanding that this is just modeling to sort of more or less predict what the mix might look like. I guess I'm just concerned that when with the CI thresholds out in 2030 and 2050, that it would kick at least 2 of these biomethane categories out of the program. And, with what we expect to see, it even in just declining electricity CI as an input to these alone, I don't know if that's accurate. So I'm wondering if maybe there isn't some way that we can come up with, and happy to circle back offline or in the bioenergy subgroup, or however would be the best way to do this. But maybe there's some way we can estimate like a conservative decline in CI for these. Although I understand it's tough and you're not able to include everything in the model. So totally appreciate that. But hoping we can explore that a little bit more. The other thing I wanted to raise was with the landfill gas CI of 61.6. That seems a little bit high to me. So I was just, I mean, I know you said you were maybe adding new values there. Are these the new values? Or
These are
you planning to update these?
These are, we'll call them V2 values. There is a set of V3 values the department recently received and is doing an initial review of. With respect to the sort of CIs seeming like they may be higher in general than what's expected, the E3 said that they would look at potentially changing the threshold for selecting what carbon intensities are available from the 75th percentile of the distribution of registered projects under CARB to the median. So I would imagine that if it's going the direction I think it's going, that would potentially result in lower CI scores for a number of fuels in the model.
Okay. Yeah, no, thanks. That I think, maybe that solves the problem. And based on Floyd's point too, right? Like I think that makes sense because this program would attract the lower range of the CIs available for these fuels. But yeah, maybe we can explore after we see that, maybe we can take a look at how we could do a declining CI. I mean, I'm just worried that it's not going to be accurate, right? Like there's a huge portion of the biomethane CI that's electricity. And again, understanding that this is just preliminary modeling, wouldn't want to see two of the categories of the fuel be kicked from the program if that's not what we actually expect to happen. But thanks for your attention on all of that, Matthew.
Yeah, thanks very much for your feedback.
Great, thanks, Sam. Let me read a short paragraph that Emily Gruber, one of the members of the TAG, sent to us last night. We forwarded it on to Matthew and TJ, but I think the group ought to hear it. She says, I think my main point of feedback is that with regard to CI scores, negative values are not appropriate in settings where a GHG is not actively being permanently removed from accumulations in the atmosphere, as opposed to avoided. That is, destroying methane should not be credited as negative, which I think affects the modeling for certain RNG pathways in the docs that we received this week. Recent GREET modeling has started to adopt this position to some extent, specifically by comparing methane impacts to situations where the methane is flared rather than vented. Even without that particular objection, it seems that some of the CI scores are assuming cross-sectoral offsetting. For example, offsetting combustion emissions with production stage assumptions in a manner that might not be consistent with Vermont's general GHG approach. So I share that, and Matthew, if you just got that comment to consider, that'd be great.
Yep, so noted.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any thoughts here on this? Okay. Matthew, I went through the spreadsheet in the last day or two and, checked the math and did a few other things. I'm not in a position to add anything of much import here. I am looking at the emissions rates for the electric sector, and I saw that there were some other comments on this question, actually from Opinion Dynamics, which of course is not NV5, but I'm still giving that some thought, but they seem to look reasonable to me. I will give it greater thought, and if I have anything to say, I'll share it with you all.
And I just wanted to make one clarification. If you are looking at the electric emissions and you see the value of 0 after 2035, it's actually not 0. The renewable portfolio, once it requires 100% renewable energy from our electric utilities, there's still an upstream emissions portion associated with the renewable generation. So the equipment, it's the emissions generated in the production of the equipment divided over the useful life of the equipment. That value just happens to be quite small compared to the other figures in the table. So if you move the decimal on the Excel sheet, you'll actually see that there are emissions from the electric sector after 2035.
Great, thank you. In fact, Opinion Dynamics made that point in one of their responses for their work as well, if I understood it correctly. So yeah, thank you. And that, makes sense. Okay,
If I
folks,
could just
any?
make one
Sure.
maybe last comment, but I just want to, as Rick, you pointed out, I'm coming back from several weeks away. So Matthew, correct me where I'm off base here, but in terms of going forward with these emissions factors, I just want to make sure the tag has kind of the right context, I think. So in terms of the potential study, ultimately, the potential study is looking to meet the GWSA targets, which are not life cycle targets, right? And the life cycle emissions factors here are useful inputs to understanding the credit valuation process that will come after the potential study. So I think the point that I'm trying to make, I think, is that we have these values that are here, and as Matthew noted, we have another version that we just got that we're kind of reviewing, but that they're I'm glad Opinion Dynamics is looking at it too, because they're going to be critical in going forward in the credit valuation process, and kind of it transitions into that process more so than the potential study. And so the potential study will be kind of this point in time of the feedback that we've been getting through the tag, and we'll have a set of values, but it is not, it shouldn't be perceived as like the final answer. And also somebody mentioned the word accurate. None of this is probably accurate. It's very precise, but it's a best estimate. So just kind of want to make sure that process everybody was reminded of that process. And to the extent I'm wrong on that, please somebody speak up. But
Thanks, TJ. We never want to confuse accuracy with precision. Yes. Floyd.
Apologies for bringing it back to my mic. I find that this process is really testing the ability of my vision to see these things clearly. So I somehow missed this one line, and I apologize for doing that. But Matthew, can you elaborate on the line item advanced renewable diesel / residues and waste? Is that like a synthetic renewable diesel through Fischer-Tropsch or something like that? Is that what that item is about?
I can't give you an answer immediately. I'd have to ask NV5. There's quite a bit of information in the reporting workbooks and the analysis workbooks. The specific details of every single line in the sheets haven't yet been communicated.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's the short description is residues and waste, as opposed to the other items which are based on either purpose-grown crops or waste fats and oil. So it sounds to me like it's a non-lipid sort of feedstock that's gone through an advanced process. So if you can confirm that that's a Fischer-Tropsch or some sort of synthetic process, I'd appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Floyd. Moose.
Hi, good morning. I just have a question on the wood section and just on the pellets. I know there's low grade, medium grade, different grades. How is that number, looked at, and also the life cycle cost? Is it assumed that the pellets are made in Vermont, or are they, just curious how that all came about, because I know that wood is a hot topic.
I believe the source material for the wood values are from the wood market reports and assessments that the state puts out. I could also follow up with NV5 to try and get more detail, but that's my understanding of how those numbers were generated. I assume it's an average of the available supply in the state.
Great, thank you. Well, anything else on this topic? If not, then thank you, Matthew, TJ. Matthew, if you can get an answer to any of these questions, before the next meeting, just flip Catherine an email and she'll share it with the group. That'd be great. Thank you very much. Ken Jones has joined us from the great state of Minnesota, I believe. And we're on to the next item on the agenda, which is a discussion of the life cycle emissions approach that OD, Opinion Dynamics, is using. It's responses to our questions. I'm going to turn it over to Catherine to facilitate this discussion.
Well, and I expect there's not going to be as much facilitation as there is sort of a process clarification here. So we did receive responses to both public comments, the bioenergy group's questions, and also questions that came up during our TAG meeting at that presentation on life cycle emissions approach. Those were all contained within the spreadsheet that was shared with you in advance. We got it only a couple days ago. So I don't know if folks have had time to process it. So my suggestion to Rick this morning was that what might work best at this stage is to take any outstanding questions or comments you have today that you'd like to share. And I will be recording those, taking notes, as will Deirdre. Put them in the chat if that's easier for you. Put your questions and comments in the chat for TAG members only. And finally, if after this meeting and you had more time to review the actual documents and responses, to send any other comments or questions that come to mind directly to Deirdre to pass along to OD. Deirdre, can I get confirmation that's good with you?
Yep, that works.
All right. So at this point, why don't we just open it up? If people did have a chance to read it, did have some specific questions or comments you wanted to raise, we can take those now, but just know that this is not your last chance. Yeah, Rick.
Well, I'll just break the ice on this. I did go through the spreadsheet and their responses to our responses to their responses in the memo. And a number of them, as you saw, especially when they relate to clean fuels, are really, hey, we haven't finished the work. We'll let you know when we give you all the characterizations. And I get that, and that's can be a little frustrating, but I understand that. There is one question though that I still am struggling with, and I must not have. We just didn't ask it, or I didn't ask it correctly. It has to do with their derating of heat pumps that have smart thermostats. We asked them to explain that. They came back with some discussion of the mathematics. I'm just still struggling with the reason that there's any derating. That's what I'm not understanding. So if we can get that question clarified, and we're going to hear from Opinion Dynamics next month, so we can ask the question then as well. I'm just being quite thick-headed on this. So that's my first question. Anybody else?
All right, got a couple of new TAG members entering too.
Yeah, and I would just reiterate that because we're expecting the emissions schedule in the next week or so, that a lot of those placeholder responses that they're still working on the model will be answerable very soon. But if there is feedback on any of this, if people could send it to me maybe by next Wednesday, say, so that we can get it to Opinion Dynamics before their next deliverable. Even sooner would be better, actually.
So for those TAG members that just joined midstream here, we are discussing the responses to comments and TAG questions around the life cycle emissions approach. So if you have anything you want to bring up, again, bring it up. You can bring it up now in the chat or afterwards and direct it to Deirdre.
Oh,
Okay.
I guess we're all waiting with bated breath for these characterizations.
All right, well then I think we can go ahead and move on to your memo, Rick.
Ah,
Bring that up.
Okay, would you mind putting it up on the screen, Catherine?
Not at all.
Okay. In the last meeting, we identified two tasks that we've had on our schedule and that we want to begin addressing. One is the question of coordination of the Clean Heat program with other programs that deliver clean heat or that may deliver clean heat measures or create credits, and questions of potential double counting or over counting might be the better expression in certain cases of the emissions reductions that certain measures or combinations of measures create. And as a consequence of that, we did two things. We tasked me with, and primarily me, but I did chat with others, and I needed to chat with more of you than I did, I'm afraid, for drafting some thoughts about the double counting questions. And we also put together a small ad hoc subgroup that met this past Monday to discuss the coordination issues. So what I produced in the meantime is what I'm calling a statement, which is similar in form to the two statements we've already sent to the PUC, one on ownership and the other one on pacing, that I put to you for that we're putting to you for your consideration for approving and sending on to the PUC or sending back for refinement. I put it, as I say, I put it all together. It's in 3 sections, and unfortunately you only got it yesterday, and I'm sorry about that. But we'd like to discuss what they say and if we're at all comfortable with the points that are being made. The folks who joined the subgroup on Monday, I definitely want, of course, you folks to weigh in on this. This statement under section A is my attempt to capture all the thoughtful comments and issues that you raised during our meeting, and to set them out in a useful way for the PUC. Mainly what we've done here is to identify areas of coordination, potential challenges, obstacles to coordination, and administrative complexity and so on and so forth. So at this point, the statement really is saying, here are things that we need to be on the lookout for, and that the implementers and administrators of the programs are going to need to be thinking about. It does include one recommendation, and I don't know if I've articulated it well. And that recommendation is that that the PUC, as soon as possible, begin the process of registering, the identifying and registering the credits that have been created. And furthermore, I use the word cataloging. Here I'm referring to in this case, what drove the creation of the credit. That cataloging in this case, did it come from another program? Was it an individual, initiative or something like that? So that we can begin to get an idea of just how much of the credits that have been created so far owe themselves in part to the leveraging of other programs. So that was my thought there. Let's start there. Folks have reactions. Catherine will take notes and edits and annotations. And if there, I need to go back to the drawing board, I will. Or if there, refinements we can make now and agree on, that's great, or whatever. So I turn it to the tag and to the members of the subgroup who met on Monday for your feedback and improvements. And I'll say, if you haven't had a chance to read it, you know, this can be a short conversation, in which case we're really going to want feedback before the next meeting to get this right. Luce.
Hi, you bring it up in your memo. It also is very tied to credit ownership. Who owns the credit? So, right, that's a big piece of this, because if a homeowner bought a pellet stove, or they bought a heat pump, and even though they got a rebate, do they get the credit, right? This is what we've talked about. Who gets the credit? So I'm just saying, thank you for bringing that up in your memo.
That came up, well, that came up in the discussion, and I'll just say it's interesting to see that we still have you know, real issues around credit generation and ownership that the PUC is going to have to resolve. This acknowledges them and the effect they'll have on coordination. Absolutely.
So Rick, I can't find my hand. So
Okay.
if I can.
Go ahead, please.
The example you use, I actually think there's already a solution, or it's actually isn't a problem. But I want to offer the other example where there is a problem.
Well,
So
this is-
if you was,
Can you
this is
reference where this is?
Yeah. The example,
this is the heat pump and then delivered fuels.
right, but that's the double counting issue. I'm gonna
But-
stick with, oh, go ahead.
Okay, that
Hold
okay.
on with that,
Then
yeah.
if we're going to deal with that later, I'll deal with it. But I don't think, yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to get that. That was, yeah. But right now I just want to stick with section A of the memo. That's
Okay.
okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, just a question on this recommendation and what Luce just said about credit ownership. Did the group discuss the for the early action credits, how, like, those are going to be entities need to report those. So is there a way, besides the entities that are reporting the the activities that they are taking for consideration as early action, for early action credits, is there a way for someone besides the person that, or the entity that's reporting them, to actually claim ownership of the credits? Was that discussed, and is that is that a possibility?
I will, boy, the answer is no, but let me open it to the folks who are on the phone then. Does anyone else have a thought? We certainly talked about ownership, but I don't think we touched on it in the way that you're asking, Brian. Okay, it may come up then further in the conversation. Matt has his hand up, but first, TJ.
Yeah, I just on coordination, I don't think there's anything necessarily that needs to be changed, but I just wanted to point out that, the memo talks about consistency in assumptions, and I think that is right. I mean, every program needs to have the same characterization towards the clean heat standard, but for example, the low income weatherization program has a lot of federal funding and requirements to meet that federal funding. Those requirements may be different than the requirements that are here locally in Vermont. And so to have perfect consistency, then somebody is going to have to do some extra work. And I just want to identify that, whether it's, having, I don't want to, I'll say this is not really what I mean, but 2 sets of books. But in order to, comply with federal requirements and comply with the local requirements, or some other translation of how this all kind of works together. And so I don't know if that's worth identifying in the memo or not. I just thought I'd raise it to see if there's any thoughts about it at this group.
Well, thank you, TJ. Let me respond. Well, at least what was in the back of my mind as I drafted this yesterday and the day before was consistency of assumptions, primarily for the purpose of making sure we get reasonably or just reasonable estimates of emissions reductions. In other words, how is the, are we getting the right amount of emissions reductions and therefore credits associated with the action? And if there are different assumptions between the programs as they report, then you really do have a problem. Wasn't thinking of other reporting requirements necessarily, but let me take a look at it and see.
Yeah, and if I may not have explained that super well, and Ben could jump in here, having worked for weatherization programs before implementation, but it's what I think about is that the weatherization programs use one sort of like calculation tool right now to calculate the amount of savings and the energy savings, which then of course leads to greenhouse gas emission reductions. And then Efficiency Vermont now uses a different tool or a different model. And so those two models could result in different outcomes. And I'm not really sure how to resolve that, or if there is a resolution right now. And but it is either significant cost for one party or the other to change their processes, or it is some sort of translation or multiple books.
I got it. Good. Yeah, that might be worth mentioning here. I'll give it some thought. Yeah.
And then
go ahead.
I saw Ben raised his hand. If Matt, you don't mind, I assume it's on the same topic. If I could turn to him, he could probably better flesh it out than I can.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to, TJ, is really the fact that OEO does on-site verification, like of all of their weatherization, rigorous quality control, blower door testing, and then also has third-party verification, both a desk review and on-site review. Whereas, to my knowledge, Efficiency Vermont weatherization or VGS weatherization projects do not have, or basically they have a different QC process. And with some of those weatherization projects relying on TRM values, which, for lack of a better way to explain it, could produce more of a standardized outcome, based on the calculation or algorithm we're using. Whereas, the OEO values will be able to be taken at face value, essentially, because, we'll know that they're pretty much exact measurements. So if you were to apply like a TRM value or algorithm to an OEO project, you'd likely would see a lower carbon reduction savings than, because you're being able to actually measure it on site. You can typically, get exact and typically higher savings values.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ben. Matt, thank you for that, Matt. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is appropriate. It's relevant. Well, it's important to me. But as it relates to the memo, I understand what you're talking about, double counting of emissions and all of that. I'm thinking more of just the measures themselves. And if this isn't the appropriate time to address it, but I do think it needs to be addressed very soon in terms of counting creditable actions. And I'll just preface it by saying, putting on my Heating and Cooling Contractors Association hat. And this afternoon, I'll be at Killington along with hundreds of other contractors at the Granite Group show, where they'll be showing the latest products and services that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and are more efficient and blah, 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 blah. And one of the things that I'll be asked repeatedly is, how do I get my hands? How do I claim these credits? I'm doing all this work. I've been doing it since January 1, just as you told me, of 2023. And I'll hand them the same form that I handed the TAG and the Public Utility Commission, which is the Clean Heat Credit form that has a very big disclaimer saying this may be worth nothing if the Clean Heat Standard doesn't become law, or if it's ruled that it's not actual a credit, but it's something. And that's all we got right now. So my question, and if you go, and as I spend the summers, I go door to door to all the heating contractors and fuel dealers, and I just ask them, you got any forms? And they show me filing cabinets full with all these forms that their customers have filled out, assigning the credits over to them. And if they're a fuel dealer, they could look at this and saying, oh, I'm going to reduce my fees that I'm going to pay if the Clean Heat Standard passes. And if they're a heating contractor, they're looking at it going, oh, this has a fiduciary value. I can sell this thing to an oil company or a propane company if the clean heat standard passes. But I always preface it by saying, I don't know. It's something, but I don't know if it's anything. And what I really want to know is, based on a conversation that some of you heard last Monday, which is, if anything that is currently regulated by the PUC, such as a tier 3 incentive program, if all of those credits, those environmental attributes, are already being claimed by Efficiency Vermont, are all those sheets of paper, thousands of sheets of paper, completely valueless? I don't know what to tell them, but I'm going to talk to them this afternoon, and I'm going to say, I don't know. I would love to be able to have some sort of firm direction on where we're going, so I can tell the contractors who are doing this work that saves their customers money, that reduces greenhouse gas emissions, that does the things that the clean heat standard directs them to do, whether or not their actions actually have any financial value to them beyond the work itself.
Right. Thank you, Matt. I'm wondering if a revision to the recommendation paragraph then would be helpful, and we can think about this. Something along the lines of, yes, begin registering, identifying, and also sorting out claims to those credits.
Yeah.
Would be the perhaps language that could be added.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Ken?
Yeah, I just want to kind of categorize this document. And I appreciate Matt's comments there about, and the extent this is a coordination activity. I think it's specifically the sort of tier three, well, maybe Efficiency Vermont too, but yeah, that mechanism about when an activity is covered under multiple programs, that sort of bringing together the players in those projects, Efficiency Vermont, tier 3, and representatives of the PUC for Clean Heat Standard, that needs to happen to sort of sort out ownership. But I want to say another piece that I think is also a coordination piece, and it's right at the outset. We have to establish early targets. We have to have baseline values of current emissions. And my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, but my understanding is some of the work that's been done in some of the planning activities, which is the Comprehensive Energy Plan, the Climate Action Plan, and maybe others. And the Clean Heat Standard. Maybe Comprehensive Energy Plan and the Climate Action Plan are consistent in the way that they measure what we need to deal with the Clean Heat Standard. If so, that's great, and then we need to use it. And I don't know if that communication has taken place of the PUC to make sure that those numbers that I say have been developed in the planning process of the Climate Action Plan and the Comprehensive Energy Plan, whether we have them. And maybe my understanding of my participation in those, they may not be relevant because they may not be on the right time frame. I know the whole LEAP modeling thing didn't cover more recent activity. Anyway, it's that process, because I think what we've been talking about so far is the characterization of clean heat measures. I want to make sure there's an emphasis on some of these early calculations to establish credit requirements. That process needs to get going as well.
Thank you, Ken. We can add some wording on that as well in that one recommendation paragraph, and if so charged, I'll come back to you and ask you to help me find those words. TJ.
Well, can I just ask for clarification? I guess I didn't understand what from the energy plan would be relevant here. I'm sorry. I guess I just didn't understand what you were saying, Ken. Are you able to?
Yeah. The energy plan measures, I think, and you certainly know better than I do, but measures the past use of energy of the specific fuels that contribute to the RCI sector. And there are numbers there. And I say, I know the climate plan has numbers, and the climate plan also projects going forward, but the projections probably start too far in the past to use them. But the point is the PUC is going to have to establish a number upon which the reduction is supposed to take place. So, and I don't know if the pacing document specifically has a starting date. I mean, I've always thought it should be 2022, but I know the greenhouse gas inventory doesn't go until except 2021. And I don't know if the comprehensive energy plan reports RCI fuel use post 20 or 21. Anyway, the point is we need to have a number on which to establish the reduction requirement, which is then going to be the basis for determining the number of credits. And because there are those numbers that are out there, comprehensive energy plan and climate action plan, that we need to make sure that what the PUC is doing, I'll say, is consistent with, is informed by that action. And if there's some, anyway, I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think so. So I think that those plans both have, the 2030 target number, right? Although they probably both assume calendar year 2030 instead of calendar year 2029, which we've now determined to be the actual time frame that we're working under. But I don't think that either of them go into so specifics to have a target for the specific sector that is annualized in between those years or even beyond. They have an amount of savings, but I think the information that's been developed over the last year or two is probably updated and probably better than what's in the that high level information that's in the energy plan. But
so then maybe the
PUC,
the PUC, when it does its work, just needs to kind of talk to you and talk to the climate office and say, hey, this is what we're doing. Is it okay? Is it significantly different than what you folks are working with? Because the next climate action plan comes out next year.
Right. Yeah, I think that could that kind of coordination would be helpful.
Great, thank you. Mr. Woods, Brian.
Yeah, so the Climate Action Office is planning to update the Vermont Pathways baseline. We're working on getting the contractor under contract to be able to start that work. I think we were looking to try and we don't have a schedule for when that it's going to be available. I don't think it's going to take many months to do that update, and that would be that would satisfy the concern that Ken raised. And we would be able to either, provide that, and we're happy to provide that information to the PUC and anybody, or because I don't know, I'm unfamiliar with how they are planning to establish the budgets and what their schedule is to establish the Crete heat budgets. But we're going to do that. We're planning on updating that baseline with the most currently available data. I think the previous pathways report that supported the climate action plan is at this point past its best by date.
Thanks. Anybody else on this part of the statement? Okay, well, we'll circle back to this before the end of this part of the agenda with the what needs to be done, next steps decision. Okay, the next one, there are two of them, and we can treat them separately or together as you feel. Have to do with the two requirements in the Act 18 for the tag to be alert to problems of double counting as they pertain to interactions amongst measures, that's 8128A5, and then as they pertain to interactions between sectors, that's A9. So why don't we start with the interaction amongst measures? I took a stab at this. I had some input from a couple of you. I'm fully responsible for whether it works or doesn't. But the idea here was to take a look, to imagine how a combination of measures installed, delivered really sequentially might create some over or possibly undercounting of emissions reductions, and to identify this as a potential problem, that one that needs to be addressed. It needs to be, its magnitude, the potential magnitude of the problem needs to be assessed, and then a decision or decisions about how best to address it. And that at this point, we were not making any recommendations one way or the other than to say that here's where we see some potential problems. Speak now, Dr. Jones.
So yeah, so the example you include there, I don't think is a problem, and I'll run it through with numbers. So let's say a house before installation of anything uses 600 gallons of fuel oil. They put in a heat pump, and the characterization of the heat pump, and let's just say it's a perfect characterization. So it goes from 600 gallons to 300 gallons, and therefore they get credits worth that 300 gallons. Let's say that's 3 credits a year for 10 or 12 years. Okay. And then at a later date, they get their fuel oil dealer switches to R100. And let's just say the R100 has a carbon intensity value of 50%. They are getting delivered 300 gallons of R100, not 600 gallons. So the fuel oil dealer gets credit for delivering 300 gallons, or he gets essentially half that, because the carbon intensity value is half. There's no double counting there. The heat pump didn't work on a house with R100. It worked on a house with fuel oil, and therefore it reduced the carbon emissions by 3 tons, or 300 gallons, the equivalent of 300 gallons, and it would only have made a difference if they had R100 when it was started, and then the reduction would have been less. But in this scenario, they reduced 3 tons. They continue to reduce 3 tons, and the fuel oil dealer is not delivering 600 gallons of R100. So I don't think there's double counting there. But the problem, the problem that we're all hoping for is heat pumps and then weatherization, where weatherization actually reduces the demand on the heat pump, and they'll still be getting the credits as if they were reducing that 300 gallons a year, when the weatherization is reducing the fuel load, the fuel demand in the house. That's a potential for double counting. But I think this is all going to be addressed maybe over time, but as we do characterization, the characterization is already going to be a little problematic, because I don't believe they're going to characterize weatherization on the specific heat use in the house prior to weatherization. It's all, reduction in airflow, increased insulation. So we don't know what the fuel use was. Anyway, my point is, I don't think the example you have there is a problem, but weatherization is, and I think we're going to need time beyond the initial iteration of characterization of installed measures to be able to address that. And I'm hoping over time, the Clean Heat Standard puts a greater emphasis on accuracy by measuring actual fuel use and fuel use reductions. But that's just my dream.
Let me jump in, and Brian, you too. Just real quick, Ken, could we not in fact have a measure characterization, that is weatherization in buildings heated, served by heat pumps, in which case it'd be, what you'd be offsetting would be any electric grid emissions of carbon. It'd be presumably it's going to be a small number, but wouldn't that solve your problem?
Well, but that's a subset of the problem. In other words, a house that is heated with wood is different than one that's heated with natural gas or with fuel oil, and I'm not sure. We'll find out when the characterization information comes in. We'll
Okay.
find out if that differentiation is going to take place. I think initially they thought it might, but the early drafts suggest that it doesn't. And then, yeah, you include heat pumps as well as wood heat, propane, fuel oil, natural gas, because in each case you'll have a different reduction. So you're right, that's the ideal, but I don't think the initial characterization is going to allow for that ideal. It's going to take a future iteration, and I don't want to slow the whole process down by requiring the initial characterization have that information if that information is going to be really hard to gather. But
Right.
down the road, I think we can.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, Ken, I mean, to me, the issue is the way Rick described it right at the beginning of the meeting, maybe not so much double counting as over allocating allowances for installed measures that actually, that are time stamped, but that the party that's installing them, like, they want to know, when I put this in, here's the credits that I'm going to earn over this period of time. And when you do that based upon an average fuel mix, and then you change what the emission profile is on the inventory side, and that's the whole point of this, is to be able to meet these inventory reductions, then I think you are over allocating the credits that a heat pump you're over allocating credits because the heat pump is now not delivering the emissions reductions on the inventory side that you thought it was.
Any thoughts?
And that's not necessarily a problem from a regulation, like from a regulated entity standpoint. I mean, they get these credits, but if the idea is we need to be able to set the budget, the credit budget, in order to be able to meet an emission reduction target in the inventory, and measures are earning more credit, there's more credits in the market than there are emissions reductions that are actually happening, then I think that becomes the challenge, as the PUC then needs to revisit what the actual budget is on a 3-year period. And it's like, oh, we have all these credits, people are earning these credits, and they're all in compliance, but we're not on a trajectory that's going to meet the emission reduction requirement.
And in general, I agree. It's going to take additional work down the road. You're right, but I think we have to have a starting point, and I don't know how to fix the starting point right now.
Okay, thanks. TJ?
Yeah, I just largely for the record, I don't always do this, but I think I just want to say I think I agree with Ken 100% in what you're saying, and that really that we're the characterization is as a prescriptive measure is an average of all the homes. Will be save more in some homes, some less in some homes. And that needs to be updated over time to reflect the average fuel mix that we might be avoiding. And that should that should over time it probably will result in less credits for a weatherization over time, because if our electric supply is clean and we're avoiding electricity with weatherization, that's just going to be a result. We may also, to Brian's point, need to then readjust the amount of credits that an obligated entity needs to acquire in a year in order to keep up the pace, whatever pace is assigned by the commission. So I just want to, echo what Ken is saying. I think you're right on this one.
Thanks. Any more thoughts about this section of the statement? God, we're chugging right along. This is great. Okay, the third one, and again, as I said, we'll come back to next steps at the end of this, and we'll also open it up for public input here as well. 8128A9 asks the tag to work with ANR to make sure that emissions reductions achieved in other sectors, and here we put in, for instance, agriculture, as a consequence of the clean heat standard, are not in some way or another double counted in the state's GHG emissions inventory and forecast. And what you see here is, touching my brain and the brains of several of you as well, we had a real hard time imagining how this can even happen. We think we've got this one covered. Certainly with ANR represented on the tag, we're going to, we're going to be talking about it. We have our own internal feedback mechanism here, but we just don't see how this can happen. Does anybody think there's an issue here that we're missing? Brian, if you want to add anything to make this clearer than I did, please.
I guess I'm not going to go through the example because I'm really interested to hear from folks, where they think this might happen, how it would occur.
Yes, we were lamenting not having the legislative history in front of us to uncover how this idea emerged. Okay, go ahead, Matt, you were going to say something?
Yeah, could you clarify what you mean by emerged?
Oh, no, we were wondering what people were thinking when they drafted this part, because we're having trouble seeing it. I'm having trouble seeing it.
Yeah.
It doesn't, in other words, if we're missing something, we really want to know what we're missing. And so that's why we've left it open like this. We don't see a problem at this point, but we will, we might be missing something. And in a moment, public comment may educate us.
Yeah.
We just didn't think that there was a problem from a clean heat measure having an impact on the inventory and forecast as it relates to another sector of Vermont's economy.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Want to go to the public then?
Sure. So let's take some public comment.
So we wanted to open up for public comment before the tag made a decision here on how to move forward. And also we'll allow time at the end, if possible, for any remaining issues we cover. That said, if you have a public comment, would love to have you raise your hand at this time. Your virtual hand. I see.
Dylan. I see. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Catherine.
Well, I see a hand raised, but I can't find it.
It's Dylan, Giambattista. Or was.
Apologies, that was in error.
Okay.
We're looking forward to it, Dylan.
Anyone else?
Well, this is great. I'm glad we're able to move along. So next steps. Here's what I'll suggest, having gone through this conversation. I'll suggest that it sounds like there's some minor but important, I say small but important edits that can be made to this document, which I can do in consultation with you offline. And we bring it back to the group for review and approval at our next meeting. And then we will have addressed 3 of the tasks put before us, at least for now. Does that sound okay, or do you have other ideas? What an agreeable group. Ken?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but I just want to put a little bit of emphasis. It's not just that we've checked off these boxes, but I do think the recommendations that this results in are really important. The characterization, the early registration, and as Matt's point, really beginning that understanding of how those early action credits are going to be assigned is really important. And let's jump on that. And my piece also about as we're setting targets, really get started on the actual numbers. I mean, we have a pacing language, but until we add the numbers to it, it's still delaying what was going to be very, very important, which is understanding the number of credits that are going to be required. So those recommendations to me are really important. That's why I encourage. I will move that we accept this document with the additions that we talked about today, so that the PUC can have it in their hands fairly quickly.
Okay, well, that's a motion. Any discussion about it? I have at least one thought, and that is, you're right, Ken. I didn't mean to be flippant about it. These are important recommendations. I want to get the words right. This group has trusted me previously in these matters, but I want to be cautious and say, hey, I want to give the group a chance to review what we do in the meantime before sending it off. So it might make sense to have another go at it 2 weeks from now. Matt.
Yeah, I don't know the protocol here. I don't know if our parliamentarian's on the line, but I feel comfortable with taking a motion and voting as Ken suggested. But I do want to see the words referencing the concern about counting the credits or measures that we have forms for, that there might be competing claim for credits.
Well, an amended process would be, and I would do this anyway. I would be in doing any editing. I'm going to come back to those of you on the tag and others who wish to be consulted on getting the words right. So this would be an iterative process amongst us, offline, of course. But it's if 2 weeks is too long, we'll get it done next week. But I want to be careful here and make sure I correctly represent the concerns of the tag in the revision. Any other thoughts about that?
Yeah, so if there's anybody who would definitely like to have this come back to the full group, I think now's the time to speak, because you've had two suggestions that it be finalized between meetings and forwarded without bringing it back to the full tag.
Okay. Well, I hear this silence as and Catherine, you tell me if I'm wrong. I hear this silence as a consent to move this thing along before the next meeting, but in consultation with a number of you who've raised issues.
And do we need a second?
No, but we do need an affirmation, so we need a vote.
Yeah.
Now it's an emotion. So all in favor of Rick's suggested process for moving this ahead, please raise your hand.
Okay.
I think you have a majority here. And
I
all
will.
opposed. I think I have to ask all opposed.
Yes. Well, I will follow up with a number of you who've expressed interest in this. Ken, Matt, Sam, Patrick, others. I'll follow up and make sure you see this before we send it off to Deirdre and the PUC.
Just for the record, Patrick, is your hand up for being opposed? Or did you leave it up?
Sorry, just scratching my face.
No, you've got.
I'm in favor. I'm in favor. I apologize.
Okay, all right, great.
Yeah. Then you can drop your hand now. He's an agreeable guy. Great. Well, thank you very much. And let me say, I do I do appreciate, the confidence you're expressing, but we'll get it right. We'll do our best. Thank you very much. Catherine, what do you think? We're running way ahead of schedule, and that's a good thing. Should we take a quick break?
Yeah.
Or
Well, we have,
what do we think?
the only thing left is, the EAG memo, and yeah, we can take like folks want a 5-minute break, and then we can come back and wrap up pretty quickly, I think. So why don't we do that? So come back at, I'll give you an 8-minute break. Let's come back at 11 o'clock.
Right,
Thanks.
thanks, everyone. Yeah, turn your video off until you come back. And then we'll know to go. Thank you. Are you feeling better, Emily?
I'm getting there. COVID is no fun.
Oh, you had COVID? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yep, had COVID this week.
I'll be passing through Bethel Saturday morning
Oh, nice.
on my way to Rome.
Rome, I know Rome.
Maine?
Yes, remember I grew up right near Rome.
That's right, exactly.
I'll be heading to back up to the Moosehead Lake area myself next weekend. Yeah.
Well, I'll be on Great Pond. Yeah. And we'll be,
And for full disclosure, I'm not in Minnesota. I'm in Ontario on my way to Minnesota.
oh, I was confused. I forgot which
Sorry.
sequencing it was.
Yeah, it's all right. I don't expect everyone to know my itinerary.
Well, yeah.
So do we have Ben back for the next
Ben
session?
Baraski, yeah, he's up.
I'm here, yes.
You're there. So Ben, I apologize. Did you share this memo with?
Yes, I believe it was included in the agenda
Yeah. It's there.
packet. Yep.
Do you want to share your screen and? with the con-
Sure. I was kind of thinking just do an overview because I don't know if we want to do verbatim, but
Well, that's
we can.
Up to you, completely up to you, whichever works best.
Yeah, I was thinking about just doing kind of like a discussion, because there's no like numbers or anything to go over, but it's fairly straightforward, I think. But should I get started or?
Yeah, we're top of the hour. I think we've got most of our folks back. Why don't you go
Yeah,
ahead?
and start with a summary. I've read it, but a summary will be helpful, and then tee it up. That's great.
For sure. Yeah, so Ben Blasky, I'm the member of the Equity Advisory Group, and presenting on the memo that we recently shared with, on EPUC and with the tag. So we took up in the credit issues subgroup, we recently took up the topic of low and moderate income front loading. So front loading meaning, took it to mean, prioritization or increasing of the obligated party low and moderate income targets in the early years of the program. And we specifically responded to the Commission's July 10th memorandum on the staff's draw proposal for credit fulfillment plans and criteria, non-compliance and waiver processes, which in that the PUC staff laid out the proposal of having 5 unique credit categories. Those 5 credit categories were delineated as low income, generic and installed credit categories, moderate income, generic and installed categories, and then a market rate credit category. So we largely agree with those 5 categories because they basically will help to track more closely low and moderate income credit market activity to help inform any future increase or decrease in the obligated party low and moderate income requirements. And so to kind of illustrate that point, we took the example of a credit cost, for example. Given the fact that credits generated from an installed measure, for example, could be significantly more costly to produce than a generic credit, and generic here we took it to mean delivered fuel, and so having a distinct credit categories that delineate between that delivered fuel or generic measure versus an installed measure, given the cost difference, we that was one reason that we determined that those would be valuable, because it would essentially allow the default delivery agent to have greater control over the Clean Heat Standard, marketplace or market activities, and allow for more prescriptive actions to be taken to ensure that low and moderate income households are receiving, an equitable share of the Clean Heat Standard, market activity annually. We also importantly did note that there's quite a bit of information, or very key information, I should say, that is still not yet known. And we did opine on that, basically, noting that in particular, it would be to actually, recommend further front loading or increasing of the low and moderate income target from the current what's in statute currently, which is 16% from low income and 16% from moderate income. Further delineated as we know from there, 8% coming from delivered fuels, 8% of that 16 for each category coming from installed. To really substantially increase that value or front load more, we need to know, basically what is currently being produced on the market for low and moderate income credits, to basically serve as a baseline to then project forward, any major increases. And so we did note that, the language in the statute does say the word shall, and, we take shall to mean must, that the PUC must or shall, basically front load to the extent reasonably possible. And so we did, basically make the recommendation that if information emerges, leading up to the initial DDA, for example, budgeting process or planning process, that, if they did want to increase that target slightly from, say, 16 to 18%, that would be, an example of, a reasonable increase rather than, a doubling or otherwise, massively increasing the target right away. Because we didn't, we thought that, basically doing a dramatic increase in that number could destabilize the credit marketplace and make it much more difficult for obligated parties to hit their targets initially. So we recommended that the front loading, any significant front loading or prioritization increasing of that target should take place and be revisited no earlier than the second triennial DDA budget and planning process. So yeah, we largely took the stance that, having this credit framework will be beneficial for really taking a targeted approach to low and moderate income credit obligations. So that, given that a market rate credit, for example, could be, much different. The acquisition of a market rate credit is going to be different than a low income credit, in cost and just reaching the clients in general. There's various aspects to it, but so we support that, what the PUC staff came up with in that straw proposal, and think it's a good framework to serve as a foundation for the Clean Heat Standard marketplace from a low income perspective or equity perspective. So that's kind of the broad overview, and happy to, I know we have a little extra time today, so if we want to further unpack this, we certainly can, and happy to discuss further. Yeah, Ken.
Yeah, I'm curious as to how the 16% was initially developed, and maybe, but then from that, is there a way to get a sense of specifically what percentage, first of all, of households, but then households that own their buildings is low income, and what percentage is moderate income? And I say it gets back, do we know where 16% came from?
I personally do not. I don't think we do, and at least the Equity Advisory Group doesn't. But we have, together with my colleagues on the EAG, have been really diving into some data from the American Community Survey, census data. To your point about how many households exist that are low income. One of the questions we've been unpacking and using to inform this work is, for example, how many households has the OEO Weatherization Assistance Program served in the last 15 years? 15 years is kind of a key number for the OEO program, for those who don't know, is clients that have been weatherized in the last 15 years by OEO cannot get re-weatherized essentially in that period. So if you go weatherized 16 years ago, you're then eligible to reapply, if you are still low income and still are eligible for the program. So we looked at the numbers that OEOs weatherized in the last 15 years, and then looked at that basically percentage of total households in Vermont that would be eligible income wise for the program. And we're trying to get a sense of like basically what percentage of the population OEO has served year over year. Preliminary data, just kind of comparing some basic numbers, suggests that, it looks like they're serving about 1% of the low income population yearly with their programs. So to that end, we're kind of diving in more, and in recent credit issues subgroups we have been discussing the possible expansion of what the definition is of a low and moderate income credit. And so we're going to be taking that up next week to potentially include establishments such as homeless shelters, food banks, nonprofit entities that whose primary mission and focus is to serve the low and moderate income population. These marginalized communities who, by and large, homeless individuals will have, of course, don't have a home to install a measure in or get fuel delivered to. And so, one of the places that they frequent, such as a homeless shelter, may be one of the ways they can benefit from a clean heat measure, such as, for example, a cold climate heat pump on a hot day. So we've been opining on basically, allowing any obligated party activity, for example, or fuels or measures installed at a homeless shelter that would then allow that shelter to serve more low-income people. Maybe that would be a good thing to include in the LMI credit category to make those eligible. So we're definitely unpacking the issue and seeing what we can do, equity-wise on that front. But yeah.
Luce, you had your hand up, and Ken, you had another follow-up.
Just a question. Did you consider landlords who, serve low-income tenants? Because, and even though they may get subsidies for fuel, it's still trying to reach our goal. It would seem like a good target.
Absolutely. In the context of what I just brought it up in terms of the expansion of the low and moderate income, because we did, a low-income landlord or landlord who has low-income tenants, rather, they would be eligible for the weatherization assistance program. They serve, or if you are a landlord, say with a 3-unit building, as long as 2/3 or 2 of the units in that building are eligible for the program, then that building then becomes eligible for weatherization. I believe the threshold is 60%. Yeah, so those would be included in basically the population that's able to be served directly by the weatherization program, which we are really viewing as the primary avenue through which many low-income households are, if not all low-income households, are able to receive installed measures. Because many low-income individuals can't afford financing, otherwise can't afford to pay out of pocket for something like a heat pump. So they would be receiving that through the 100% subsidized program, such as the weatherization assistance program. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my question too. Thanks, Luce.
Good.
Rick.
I just want to understand what you just said, Ben. If 60%, tell me if I'm correct. If 60% of a building, a rental property in this case, is occupied by low-income tenants, then the entire building is eligible for weatherization?
Correct. Yep. Okay. So they do pretty rigorous income verification. So typically what happens is, let's say one tenant becomes aware of the weatherization program, they know they're eligible, and they know their neighbor might be eligible. They can basically apply for the program together with their their neighbor, let's take the example of a 3-unit building. They could then both submit their application, and then the landlord typically is on board with it, because then their building effectively gets free weatherization services. The only requirement is that the landlord, in that case, would have to be required to pay for any health and safety measures, which includes the installation of bath fans, and obviously like smoke alarms, any health and safety related stuff such as wiring. The exception to that rule is when the person who owns the building, the landlord themselves is low income. Then it's an owner occupied building, and they don't have to then pay for anything. So, and the whole building still gets weatherized. So.
And then the health and safety measures are part of the package.
Exactly. If the if it's an owner occupied landlord situation. So
great. Thank you.
Luce?
Sorry, one more question. And so this is also true for manufactured homes, right? That they are eligible, they will be eligible for these upgrades, right?
Absolutely. The manufactured homes are a pretty big percentage of the homes served by the weatherization program. And I would say that they're, in terms of weatherization statewide, they are really the experts on mobile homes, because I believe it's something like 30% of the homes served by the program in the last 5 years was a mobile or manufactured home. And so that is a pretty big topic on the Equity Advisor Group, is figuring out any of the gaps in existing programs that might prevent a mobile homeowner or a mobile home renter, for that matter, from taking advantage of clean heat measures, because they present different challenges, in terms of the layout of the home. A traditional ductless heat pump, for example, wall-mounted heat pump, in many cases can't be attached to the wall. Some of these mobile homes have 2-inch wall cavities. They don't have, some of them don't have sheetrock. It's literally, cardboard. So structurally, they might not be able to, do it. So the way to basically for them to take advantage of it would be like a dual fuel system, where it's a traditional, maybe propane fired unit with a heat pump, A coil, it's called, sits over the heat exchanger. So that would basically do the majority, maybe 75% of the heating, and then it would kick over to fossil fuel during the coldest months of the winter. Delivered fuels, of course, can still be delivered to a mobile home. But the issue of kerosene comes up, and outside tanks. So it's unique challenges. So we've been talking about that quite a bit on Equity Advisor Group, just to make sure that there's, that's kind of fully thought about. And there'll definitely be some recommendations in our final report to that end, and quite a bit of discussion about mobile home and manufactured homeowners' ability to take advantage of clean heat measures.
And the cost for the upgrades to health and safety, because I can see where electric panels may need to be upgraded. That's in our $17 billion cost estimate. Did we assume a percentage that are going to need upgrades that will be provided by the program?
So typically mobile homes, oftentimes have 100 amp or some of them even have 60 amp services. So that is, as it stands now, the weatherization program is able to make those upgrades as part of their program, with the extra federal dollars from the ARPA program, for example, and then the IRA money that's incoming from the Inflation Reduction Act is also can be used for some electrical measures. But
right.
So,
we're not assuming any money right now from the Clean Heat Standard Act. My understanding is to help for upgrades.
right, it would be
Right.
in direct upgrades.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Just to be clear, costs for upgrades, I have to look at what's included for cost for low income weatherization, but generally costs for electrical upgrades are, and definitely not for market rate, are included in anything in the potential study. And Lucy, you just referenced a number that was kind of in the documents, the drafts that we sent in July around for the technical feedback, but that just to be clear to everybody, that number is not a number that should be used. There's so many changes from what was in those drafts to what we'll see soon, that it's really no longer relevant. So I just wanted to put that out there as well.
But at some point, somebody has to pay for these upgrades if we want to help low-income people. That's, some
Right.
whether
Oh,
it's
absolutely. It is
Right.
the issue that you're bringing up is very relevant. Just to be clear, I just wanted to be clear on, that number that has taken on a life that it of its own.
Right. Yeah, and the Equity Advisory Group has brought that up loose. The basically pre-weatherization activities such as home repair that may be needed to weatherize a home. That is a hot topic on the Equity Advisory Group because many of these homes just can't be weatherized right out of the box because there's so many issues. So it's something that we're probably going to recommend in our final report. Still working on that.
And that's due next month, is it not?
Our Equity Advisory Group final report, for us, I believe it's due on the first check or the second check back on January 15th.
Oh, okay.
So we have begun drafting that. We kind of, each member of the group has a section they're tackling, and then we're going to compile it all.
I don't know why I said next month, but I knew it was coming, that you were, working on it. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
So Ben, just before we close this out, is there anything that, I appreciate that you're bringing this to the awareness of the tag. Is there anything you need from the tag?
I mean, we have a pretty good, in terms of, technical knowledge from the tag. I guess one question right off the top of my head, and maybe we can get it answered right away here. Matt, I think you might have answered this prior, is renewable diesel able to be burned or put in outside tanks as a replacement for kerosene? That's one topic that's been thrown around, but
Yeah, and Floyd knows quite a bit about this as well, but Floyd, maybe you could describe the equivalency of renewable diesel and heating oil versus kerosene.
Sure. So my understanding is they, are chemically very similar. And so the same sort of practices you would apply for one applies to the other. And so, you have cold flow additives that you would put in distillates and, presumably similar, if not the same, cold flow additives and other sort of additives that are in common practice could be applied to renewable diesel and biodiesel as well. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah, because in unpacking, for example, specifically with mobile homes, we know that a good percentage of those, if not about half of mobile homes in Vermont, burn kerosene as their baseline fuel. And so in thinking about those homes being able to take advantage of clean heat measures such as a renewable diesel, I think it was an open question. But on the weatherization front, we do have Jeff Wilcox, who runs the weatherization assistance program, so he's very knowledgeable on that front. So haven't had to reach outside of the group for any weatherization questions thus far. So
so I guess to summarize my point, if you are using kerosene, you can certainly use renewable diesel and biodiesel in that application
with the additive, the cold flow additive,
with whatever you're using to use the baseline fuel. Yeah,
got it. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. The fuels are also, just to clarify, the fuels are also, kerosene is also mixed. A winter blend of diesel fuel, on-road diesel fuel, includes kerosene, and there is off-road fuel that is blended with kerosene, and heating oil certainly blended with kerosene for cold weather tanks. There are some kerosene appliances, monitor heaters, for instance, that are pretty finicky and will require kerosene. Some even require clear kerosene, but those are largely going away. In many cases, mobile homes or homes without basements that require an outdoor tanks are moving to propane.
Right. Yep. So yeah, that's what's being discussed in EAG world. I don't know if I have anything else to update you all on, but more to come.
Thanks very much. And actually, we're going to move from that to Matt and Emily Roscoe to give us any other additional updates from the EAG.
I have been out sick with COVID this week, so I'll hand it off to Matt. I was not at the EAG meeting on Tuesday.
Well, to make you feel a little bit better, Emily, we had a very short meeting because we did not have a quorum. We met for about 20 minutes and heard a very interesting presentation about distributed utility scale geothermal heating systems. But because we didn't have a quorum, we just had a brief conversation and then said goodbye.
Looks like the end of August has got us all
Yeah.
taking our last few free days before the school year begins. Well, thank you. Catherine, well, we have another.
Yeah, we do have a time for one more opportunity for the public to comment on the last couple of items on our agenda, if they have anything to say. So yes, Anitha. And Thea, excuse me.
That's okay, I'm used to it. So my name is Anthea Dexter Cooper, and I'm an attorney for Conservation Law Foundation. CLF is appreciative of all the work that has been done to design the Clean Heat Standard program so far, but continues to be concerned about, one, inconsistent assumptions leading to different carbon intensity scores in each of the technical reference manual, the potential study, and the supplemental accounting for the greenhouse gas inventory and forecast, which could lead to misalignment amongst what is implemented as the Clean Heat Standard program, what is anticipated as the outcome of the Clean Heat Standard program, and what is inventoried as the emissions reductions from the Clean Heat Standard program. And two, negative carbon intensity scores, creating a market where there are clean heat measure credits retired that do not correspond with a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in the thermal sector. Pertinent to your meeting today, CLF is concerned that the assumptions about carbon intensity scores in the potential study, even with it being for a point-in-time model, are inconsistent with the methods used in the Agency of Natural Resources supplemental accounting for the most recent greenhouse gas inventory and forecast, which adopts Eastern Research Group's Vermont Energy Sector Life Cycle Assessment for May of this year. While the emissions factor spreadsheet appears to rely on the upstream emissions factors for fossil fuels from that May assessment, it also appears to contradict the May assessment's approach to biofuels. For example, that May assessment concluded it would not be appropriate to assign biomethane credit for avoiding methane emissions in another sector. Further, CLF agrees with Floyd Vergara and Matthew Baker Poole that it is confusing to have life cycle accounting emissions factors listed under a combustion emissions factor heading. This is especially true when there is a negative combustion emissions factor listed, as is the case for biomethane in the emissions factors spreadsheet, because the combustion of fuels, including biomethane, produces CO2. CLF previously raised concerns over the possibility of inconsistent assumptions in comments and questions filed in EPUC on April 30th, July 26th, and July 31st of this year, and raised concerns over the distortionary impacts of negative carbon intensities and crediting avoided methane emissions in a non-thermal sector in comments filed in EPUC on April 30th and June 19th of this year. CLF respectfully requests that those comments be considered and that the third question CLF asked on July 26th on ensuring consistency across analytical frameworks used to design the Clean Heat Standard program be answered. Thank you.
Thanks, Anthea. Thank you very much. Anyone else?
So that brings us to kind of just any agenda items to be thinking about for the next meeting. And I'm not sure that I got this correctly. We're not going to have any, we will have several documents from Opinion Dynamics between now and the next meeting that we will be able to discuss and review with them at the meeting. Is that right, Deirdre?
I think they're not planning to come until the 19th, the meeting of the 19th, so not at the next meeting on the 5th.
Right.
Okay. So that leaves the possibility then if we get that information and the tag wants to create a subgroup or discuss that with the tag in full, they can do that, but they won't be able to have any input from the OD in the next meeting. Yes, Ben, and then Ken.
It's just wanted to jump in off the, we're just talking about tag and EAG coordination. Just wanted to point out that the technical advisory group is responsible for ensuring that the installed measures going to low and moderate income groups actually lower energy bills. I believe that one's in statute, so potential agenda topic in the future or subgroup, but given that we're, time is ticking, I figured future coordination might be necessary on that one. Just want to throw it out there.
Yeah, thank you. Reminder. Ken?
So I don't know what the discussion has been about the next agenda, but we will be getting the NV5 report, the final. I'm looking at the final version of the potential study, and my guess is that that can definitely lead to very, very, very significant discussion, because as I understand statute, the Public Utility Commission is to use the results of the potential study for the purpose of establishing credit values and credit requirements. And so I just tell you right now that to be clear about when we look at the NV5 product, what it means for credit value is a, I'm going to want to spend a lot of time on that, because it's going to be important. And then a second little thing, which I open up to anyone here. I'm aware of, this is related to 100 amp service and servicing heat pumps. I'm aware of controls rather than upgrading to 200 amp, which in a mobile home to me is overkill, but I'll let the electrical engineers weigh in. There are ways to control circuits so that when there is a high demand for a particular implement, if there is a way to decrease the demand for things like, because sometimes it's a startup on a device that leads to a spike. And in that case, you can reduce the power demand for things like refrigerators, hot water heaters, and dryers during that sometimes short spike, so that you don't actually have to upgrade to 200 amp service to take on things like heat pumps. There's a company called Emporia that has those devices. So I just ask for folks that are in that electric efficiency world, if they could look into that or raise it to electrical engineers. Is this a viable, because it's much cheaper to put those control mechanisms than it is to do a full 200 amp upgrade to a mobile home. I don't think mobile homes need 200 amps, but I'm willing to hear others. But I just throw it out there. If other people can follow up on that, that'd be great. Thanks.
I'm not sure who was up for next, but I have Michelle's hand and then Matt.
Thanks, Catherine. Quick response to Ken's question about the controls. I happened to be at a conference last week where there was at least one paper that discussed the pros and cons of using that sort of software for controlling the service. So I will pull that paper and distribute it to TAG.
Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, just a quick response to Ken. This is not part of our purview, but it's certainly part of my world, which is we're also trying to install car chargers, level 2 car chargers in many of these homes. So, I mean, that's a part of the consideration, I think, for the contractor community when they think about whether or not the service panel can accommodate a heat pump. There are others that may want a car charger either before or after or concurrently. So I'm just throwing that out there. Then the other thing is, I'm not sure, maybe I should just talk to Rick offline, but I do want an opportunity to articulate or explain and give people a chance to absorb this memo that I've written, that it's done. It's just, it has to go through a couple different channels, but it will be submitted to the PUC because it will, as discussed at the last meeting, suggest that we need clarity on how a clean heat fee is collected and how credits are accounted for. And it has some it provides a pathway that you may all want to consider and tear apart or agree with or whatever. And I don't know when's the appropriate time to do that, but I'm just putting that out there and explaining why we didn't discuss it today.
Yeah, no, we didn't discuss it today, so it's still in the queue, in my view. So
Thank you,
yes, Matt, thank you.
Was, yeah, simply postponed till next
Right.
time. Can I get clarification from TJ? Are we going to get the NV5 final study between now and 2 weeks from now? And are they going to be at our meeting?
It is statutorily required by September 1st, which I think is a Sunday or a Monday. So, if possible, we'll do it the Friday before. If not, it'll come the morning after Labor Day. So there might not be a much time in between the meetings, but there will be a report. Yes. I'm going to ask Matthew. I can't remember if NV5 has committed to be available on September 5th. I seem to recall we had assumed that, but not sure.
They'll certainly be available to do a presentation. We hadn't finalized whether or not that was going to be in the setting of the tag or if it would be another setting, just as logistics allow.
Right. So
Right.
we can follow up in with you, Rick, and Catherine soon.
Great. Perfect.
Yeah, because I can imagine, as Ken suggested, that will take quite a bit of our agenda for the next meeting, if that's possible, to have them there. Any other items for our upcoming agenda? Deirdre, I have not taken a glance at our schedule and the items that you may have, you and Rick have agreed to on our tag activity schedule. I don't think, is there something there that we need to be aware of?
I think, the initial thing was the energy programs, like a vote, but it seems like we resolved Rick's memo for the most part today, so that won't need to be there. And then I think the rest was, needs to be updated because we aren't gonna get the full TRM on the 30th, so it'll probably be a matter of, well, Rick and I will talk offline, but
Yeah, probably a pushback of at least 2 weeks, right?
right, and then really the review, setting up groups to look at the emission schedule and the characterization of clean fuels. So to dive into that is my guess.
You'll Ken.
At the risk of the wrath of my fellow members, I want to suggest the possibility of adding another meeting in September. I think September is going to be so full of stuff, and I know that the PUC is intending to have draft rules by October 1st. I believe that may be the case. And so I just want to raise now the possibility of an additional meeting in September.
Perhaps a week after the meeting of the 19th or a week before. Okay, well, we'll canvass the group on that, and yeah, let's think about that. I appreciate that. We knew that we were coming to, crunch time, so this might be necessary. Certainly, subgroups, but yeah, okay.
So if that's to be a consideration, seems like maybe what's needed is to actually sit down and look at all of the tasks that have to be completed before the beginning of October and see if that, it will fit into 2 more meetings or it requires a third, but maybe we can come forward the next meeting with that laid out very clearly.
Or even sooner through an email, but yeah. That's right, Catherine.
Okay, then I think we're in a position to adjourn in almost an hour early today.
Great. Is there anything else from anyone? If not, then thank you all. Thank you, members of the public, other folks involved. Really appreciate it. Enjoy the weekend and take care. All the best. Thank you, Catherine, Deirdre, others. Thank you.